All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into an ancient name that's suddenly everywhere. I mean, it's all over the internet right now. And that name is Baal.
Yeah, you've probably seen this name thrown around in some pretty wild claims, right? We're talking viral theories, connecting it to global elites, secret rituals, the kind of stuff that really gets people talking online.
So what's the real story here? To get why everyone's talking about Baal now, we've got to go way back. We need to sift through the online noise and find out what's fact and what's just theory.
Okay, so first things first, let's look at why this name is blowing up. What exactly are people saying about it today?
So here's the rundown of the modern claims. People online are connecting Baal to some really powerful figures in secret societies. They're pointing to things like the Epstein files or weird financial records as, proof that there's some kind of black magic or occult rituals going on behind the scenes. It's all about symbols of power and control.
But here's where it gets really interesting. To actually make sense of all this, we need to rewind. We have to go back to where the story of Baal really started. And trust me, it wasn't with any of this cloak and dagger stuff. It began with something, surprisingly normal.
Believe it or not, the word Baal wasn't even a name at first. It was just a word, an ancient Semitic and Hebrew word that simply meant master, lord, owner, or even husband. It was a totally common title for anyone in charge.
So, how in the world does a generic title for boss become this huge symbol of idolatry? Well, it was a slow process. It went from being just a word, a title, to an idea. The idea that something else, something created, could bring you rain, good crops, and prosperity. Then, that idea was given a physical shape, an idol, and from there it snowballed into a whole state-sponsored system, a system of power.
And that right there is the key. The whole focus shifted. People started looking for prosperity from a created thing, not from the creator. It was all about getting those immediate, earthly rewards. It became a system that put something else between them and God.
Okay, so now the story gets a real hero. This is where the prophet Elias, or Ilias, as he's known in the Quran, steps onto the scene. And he wasn't just there to smash a statue. No, he was there to take on the entire system.
And you have to understand, this wasn't some weird little cult. The worship of Baal was the official state religion. We're talking 450 state-sponsored priests, paid for by the king, literally influencing the whole society. Think of them as the original influencers, with a government contract. So Prophet Elias comes in and asks this one powerful question that cuts right to the heart of it. He says, "Do you call upon Baal and leave the best of creators?" It's so simple, but so profound. Why are you worshiping this thing, and turning your back on God?
So what was the deal people were making? It was a trade-off. The system of Baal promised all the good stuff, rain, great harvests, wealth, success, basically control over your life. But the price? You had to obey the system. And what fueled that obedience? Fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of everything falling apart. It was a system that ran on anxiety, and sometimes it demanded the ultimate sacrifice.
All right, let's bring this all back to where we started. We have this ancient story about fear and a desire for control. How does that connect to the stuff we're seeing online today?
This is where we need to be really careful and look at the evidence versus the assumptions. For instance, the source material points to real things, like an email mentioning the sacred cloth from the Kaaba found in documents related to Epstein, or a wire transfer that references Baal.name. That's the evidence. But then there's the assumption, the giant leap that says this definitely means they were doing a black magic ritual. See the difference? One is a fact, the other is a story someone built on top of it.
So why do these theories catch on so easily? Well, maybe it's because the desire behind them is as old as time itself. It's that desire for a shortcut to power, a kind of cheat code to get control over your life instead of taking the slower, maybe harder path of actual faith. There's a story in the Quran about Harut and Marut that hits this nail right on the head. Two angels were sent down to Babylon, and it was a test for humanity. They offered to teach people forbidden magic, but they were totally upfront about it. They said, "Look, we are only a test, so do not disbelieve." But what happened? Some people just couldn't resist the shortcut. They chose that power, that control over guidance. And then they used that knowledge to do real harm, like separating husbands and wives. And this really gets to a core belief in Islam. True spiritual power isn't about finding secret symbols or some magic formula to bend the world to your will. It comes from a direct connection, from prayer, from seeking guidance.
So when you really boil it down, what was the Baal system? It wasn't just the statue. It was a whole machine built on our most basic human emotions. You can see it here. It's overwhelmingly about fear and a deep desire for control. The promise of wealth is what gets you in the door, and the rituals are just there to keep the system running.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question to chew on. If Baal was an ancient system, built on fear and the promise of control, what are our modern Baals? What are the things we put our faith in today, hoping they'll give us security and success? What systems demand our obedience and feed on our fear, all while promising us a little more control? That's the real takeaway here. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.